Hi everyone, welcome to Bonnie Carolee Makes Cards. Today's cards feature Simon Says Stamps Center Cut Snowflake. I'm doing an ink smooshing background and then highlighting the snowflakes using gouache. This process really enhances that snow flurry effect of this stamp design. So let's get started. I begin by creating all three ink smooshed backgrounds. I'm working on Bristol Smooth cardstock. This is a good choice for this technique as it can withstand a certain amount of water. I like to work with one color at a time. I apply some ink directly to my media mat, spritz it with water, and then apply it to the paper. I then go on to the next color. By using this approach, I'm able to ensure that the colors are fairly evenly distributed across the panel. I'm working with Distress Oxide inks. For the darkest panel, I use Peacock Feathers, Chipped Sapphire, Seedless Preserves, and Black Soot. For the panel with the pink tones, I'm working with just two inks, Picked Raspberry and Candied Apple, and for the third blue tone panel, I use Peacock Feathers, Lucky Clover, and Mermaid Lagoon. I apply a little bit of heat with my heat tool just to speed up the drying process. All of the stamped images on the panels will be embossed. For the dark panel, I wanted a black line. I try to avoid using black embossing powder because it can sometimes leave some specks here and there. Although really for this dark background it probably wouldn't have mattered. But I do what I always do, and I stamped the image with VersaFine ink. This ink can take a while to dry, so it is perfect to use with clear embossing powder. The other two panels were stamped with Versamark ink. The pink panel was embossed gold, while the blue one was embossed with white. Next, I paint all the snowflakes using gouache paint. The embossed line helps create a bit of a dam and makes the painting easier. Gouache is an opaque water-based paint. Depending on the amount of water that you use with it will affect its opacity. I'm using just a little bit of water because I do want those snowflakes to pop off the panel. I use just enough to help that paint flow nicely. Because the snowflake lines are so fine, I'm using a water brush liner. A 0 or 1 size would work as well. To paint fine lines, I keep the pressure fairly light. I also choke down on the brush to increase the amount of control that I have. The first panel took about 25 minutes to paint. The second and third panels went much more quickly. I not only got into a rhythm, I also figured out an approach to painting each of the snowflakes that worked for me. I started off by painting all of the columns in the branches and then went back and did all the short strokes. For whatever reason, that approach seemed to be much more efficient. The snowflakes that were embossed in gold and with the faux black stood out and had much more definition than the ones that were embossed with white. When I looked at the panels side by side, I did have a preference for the ones that were more defined. But as I looked more at the blue panel, I kind of liked that softer, looser look. I watered down the gouache a little bit more so that I could apply spatter to the panels. I used the same brush that I painted with so that the spatter would be fine. The panels were placed in a splatter box to protect my work surface. For the pink and the blue backgrounds, the circle sentiment was embossed directly on the panels. To add some dimension, I was able to find a die that matched the circle from Hero Art's Infinity Circle nesting dies. I also die cut white sheet foam and then stacked the two together. The panels that had been die cut using the largest die from My Favorite Things stitched rectangle stacks 2 was then mounted on an A2 size card base. The panels were a little bit warped from the spritzing of the water during the ink smooshing technique, so I just popped them under my MISTI for a few minutes to flatten them out. The foam back sentiments were adhered to the cards. For the dark panel, the sentiment had been stamped on black cardstock originally. I thought it had provided just a bit too much contrast, so I changed things up. The ink smooshing was a little bit lighter, but I thought it helped brighten things up, and so I went with it. To finish up, everywhere that there was a circle, whether it be on the snowflakes or in the background, and the center of the snowflakes, I embellished it with Nouveau drops. For the dark and the pink panels, I used Dream Drops, Indigo Eclipse, and Love Potion. I love the soft shimmery effect. For the blue card, I chose Caribbean Ocean Crystal Drops. I thought that the bright blue helped to liven up this soft panel. And that wraps up these 3 cards with Simon Says Stamps Center Cut Snowflake featuring an ink smooshing technique and highlighting the snowflakes with gouache paint. As always, I appreciate your visit.